Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Carpenter. I am the Digital Content Strategist at Griffin House. And today I'm hosting for Ashley Craven. She is the Griffin House Marketing Director. Today we are honored to be joined by veteran Griffin House author Marnie Forcieri. Be sure to join the free online community for this Ed webinar. As a member, you get all sorts of great resources. You can view and share this recording. You can take the CE quiz. You can download the slides and the chat log. You can join discussions, and you will also get invitations to the upcoming Ed webinars. You can join this community at edweb.net/bookchat. Griffin House is a proud sponsor of today's Ed webinar presentation. For those who may be unfamiliar, Griffin House is an award-winning publisher of resource books for parents and educators of children birth to 8 years old. We help parents and educators bring the joy of learning alive for young children. We're delighted to share our lineup of everything that's new for this season, including Marnie Forcieri's The Basics of Childcare, which just launched at the beginning of this month. You can head over to griffinhouse.com to learn more. As a part of our sponsorship, we are so happy to be able to offer you a special promotion for our audience today. As a gift for attending this webinar, we would like to offer you 20% off your purchase by using the code BOOKCHAT whenever you go to check out on griffinhouse.com. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Marnie Forcieri. She's the founder and CEO of Young Innovators, a technology-enabled network of innovative childcare programs. Go ahead and take it away.
Hello, I am so excited to be here today and share the basics of starting a child care center. I see a lot of teachers in the chat telling us what they do, so I'll try to tailor this so that this serves also as a step-by-step guide to how to take your career to the next level. So let me tell you first about my story. So after working in corporate America for many years, I was ready to open my business. So the first thing I did is that I started researching different businesses for sale. And I found the childcare industry, and I loved it. So the first thing I did was I looked up businesses for sale. But when I found these locations, I quickly found out that the lenders, the banks, wouldn't give me money to buy those facilities because I didn't have any experience as a teacher or as a childcare operator. So that's when I actually decided to go into childcare franchising. So I went there. It was easier to get the financing and get some industry knowledge. And while I waited, that was the route that I chose. When I started in the industry, I decided to actually go into the same process that my teachers and administrators will go. So I went back to school to get a child development associate. And I waited 2 years for my facility to be open, but I decided to make the best of it. So I also worked in a child care center, and I started understanding the industry and the different age groups. After that, I actually got my director's credential. So I was super excited, ready to open my business, and then this is what happened. 2008. I opened my first center in the middle of a recession. A center licensed for 200 kids, but I only had 25 and 8 teachers. So in order to survive, I actually needed to become the director of the school because I didn't have any money to pay a director. And I also realized that it was my risk and not the franchising that I was in. It was my risk. And that I had to pull out my business background and my business expertise to make this successful. So after a couple of years, I did, and that center became really successful. But then I was ready to move on and do something else. So that's how I entered the independent childcare business. So when I did it this time, it was a little bit more easier. So this time I was buying a struggling school. And I went to my banker and I told them that I wanted to buy this center. And they were surprised and they said, but this center is struggling. But the good thing is that I already had the background information on child development, and I had been a successful operator, and I had a great business plan. So the bank agreed to lend me the money. That was the beginning. So that when I opened the second center, it was on waiting list before I opened because I had implemented what we now call the secrets of success of a child care center. So I've been approached by many people over the years. How do I start a child care center? How do I do this? From teachers to administrators to other business people. And I go back to the same question. Why do you want to open a child care center? As Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that is especially true in childcare. Running a childcare center involves not only managing employees, but also parent collections, dealing with customers, having an understanding of licensing regulations. And it's also a big responsibility to accept, to care and educate the next generation of children. So the long-term success of your business is tied to the operator. Who is there in that site? And to the reputation of your facility. So, but if you have the right motives in place, then you're on a right path to build a super successful business. That's the most important thing. So childcare entrepreneurship is not for everyone. So if you rather follow like a specific trajectory, this might not be the right fit because this is a roller coaster of emotions, especially in this time. But it also involves when you are aware of your skills and you really understand and have a growth mindset, you can work toward that. So I've been asked two questions always. How do I know if I'm ready to open my own center and become a childcare entrepreneur? And what happens if I don't have all these signs? Can I still develop? And I always say back to, we'll walk you through some of the signs. And if you do have a growth mindset, you can learn and work on a plan to develop those skills. So one of the things I did is that I asked very successful childcare entrepreneurs to participate in a survey, informal survey. And I wanted to know what were the signs that they knew that they were ready to open their first childcare center. So I got a lot of ideas, very interesting. But among them were this one. First, you have to be ready to work really hard and do whatever it takes. At the beginning, you will be probably covering for teachers if you're a teacher, or driving the bus, or cleaning the floor. So if you're willing to do that, then you're fine. The second thing is that you can separate your personal from your professional life. So childcare is a business where you encounter many stories and you have to keep it confidential and not take it home. So that's very important for a childcare entrepreneur. One of our providers gave me this one. I thought it was very funny, so I included it. You can handle drama, and you're a leader. You know how to navigate that. And also, life and purpose is important to you, and you will have an understanding of the industry and the market, and have a basic knowledge of early childhood education. Also, your finances play a critical role. So the best childcare entrepreneurs, they're confident about bringing value to the customers. They're not afraid of working hard, and they have that ability to form personal connections. But they all have one thing in common. They have a great business plan, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with why businesses fail in order to understand how to make a successful business. So these are the core things that happen with businesses. So one of them is the lack of a marketing or business plan. So a lot of early childhood professionals are very passionate about their communities and they want to work with in this specific community, but probably they have not worked on the business side. So that is actually a recipe for failure, that you have to work on the business side and understand it. The other thing is poor financial management. So if you cannot handle your financial properly, it will be difficult to manage the finances of a child care center. The other thing is poor leadership. There's a difference between managers and leaders. Managers can run a program, but leaders are the ones that people follow. So understanding, like having both parts is really important in a new business. The other thing is poor location. So that's one of the leading causes for failure too, because you can maybe choose a location and you have no visibility, or you don't have enough parking for your teachers, or maybe you don't have the proper zoning laws. Whatever it is, the cost of poor real estate selection will be reflected on your revenue. And then last but not least, poor customer service. For example, attaining high levels of customer service requires a very skillful, patient, and seasoned director and administrator. For example, you see this cute little toddler? Well, one of the most common areas of complaint is toddler biting incidents. So if a child care owner and director have a system in place where they can actually address a parent concern, you can actually handle also a parent complaint, because every incident leads to a customer service complaint. So you really need a process and a system and highly trained personnel to actually talk about this. So let's see the industry at a glance. So solid business plans, regardless, this is a big industry. There will still be a lot of need for that. Even if it's home daycare, I see somebody posting a thing, people will still be needed. In home daycare center, faith centers, everybody, I suggest, work through the steps of building a business plan to have a better understanding of your marketing. So the first thing, let's dive into that and understand what are the market segments. So we have to understand that policies and tax breaks and initiatives and regulations, that all shape our industry. So we are pretty much tied to a lot of that and keep on evolving that. So there are different business models, and it's very important, the business model, because your financial performance will actually depend directly on the type of business models that you have and also on your profitability. So we have independent childcare providers, which represent the majority of childcare centers in the childcare setting. Most childcare providers are in home daycare settings, taking care for most of our kids, and we have over 1 million great childcare professionals working in this segment. We have faith-based nonprofit chains, employers that want to offer benefits to their employees, the franchises, and the corporate chains. So what is the difference between all of them? And what makes some providers make a lot of money and maybe not, some of them may be struggling and maybe just making a difference? Well, there are many factors that depend on that, including how your knowledge on the industry, your location, but also an understanding of the industry and the capital and finance that you put. So let's move into the most common for-profit business models. So they're the independent childcare centers, and they range in size. That includes the small operators from home daycare providers to small centers with 20, 30, 40 kids to 200 kids. Some of them even operate multi-sites, several sites. Also, we have childcare franchises, which is another model that where somebody or an individual, a group, or a company licenses that has a system for a specific territory. So how do I choose a business model? That's the first question. So the first thing is how do you want to be involved in the operation? So you have to ask a couple of questions like, do I actually want to be involved, very involved, or am I a teacher? Or am I able to find somebody that is my investor and open that kind of childcare setting? How do I want to start this? Another thing to consider is your personal finances. So if do you meet the network requirements of a franchise? And if not, then how much do I need to save to open my childcare business? I'm very excited because I have a couple of teachers that are actually working towards that goal right now. And I think it's great, or trying to find investors for their centers. That is the way to scale and grow in the business. So another thing to consider is your professional experience. So you really need to understand your inventory of skills. So are you confident about selling to people? What is the area that you enjoy the most? And what is the business that you don't enjoy the most? You really have to be self-aware and understand not only your inventory of skills, but what you want to do with your life. And understanding of child development is important because you have to be passionate about this industry, and also a community like your family. Are they able to support you during emotionally and financially, especially during the early stages of opening a business? So, okay, so let's say we've decided we meet the 10 signs. We are a childcare entrepreneur. We're ready to go. That one thing that is critical for us to develop a business plan is the ability to separate your emotions from research. That is critical. You might love children, but if you're a business person, you might understand, like, maybe this is not the right market to open this childcare business. So that's why it's so important to actually separate data and your research from your emotions. So if you're willing to do that, let's dive into the steps. So we've written them down step by step. So these are some things that we have to do before we actually sit and write a business plan. So the first thing we do is we find a trade area. So what is a trade area? It's a zip code. So according to the SBA, your trade areas, your zoning laws, regulations depend and vary. We have attendance from every single state almost in the country in the webinar. So each one of us, every zip code is going to have a different regulation, and your taxes and local laws and real estate, everything is going to be very, very different from that. So another thing is after you find that trade area, we have to understand if this area is an area for growth. So in order to do that, we would actually go into the demographic report. So what is a demo report? It's a report that you actually pull out from one company from the Census Bureau or their mapping softwares that you can buy this a very informational and critical pieces of information, the demographic report, and they will tell you who lives in the area, how many children are there, what is the average age of the person, what is their marriage status, and the goal of this is that you have to try to see and understand this from a bird's eye view. You have to understand this market. So let me show you a demographic report. So this is one of the demo reports I pulled for an area. So as you can see, there are a lot of zeros in this demographic report. So this is a growing area of a lot of new developments, a lot of new homes built there. But from the demographic report, I really got excited about this particular trade area. But when I looked at the demo report, well, I separated my emotions from the data, and I realized this might not be the right trade area for our childcare centers because there's not enough demand. You want to see if there are a lot of kids in the area. You want to see the average age. There are a lot of factors that play into that. So once, let's say you pass point 1 and 2. So you found a trade area and it has great potential. Then the next step is to try to find potential sites. So what is in that trade area? So this is when you start looking for a professional real estate person to help you identify this rent. You might find rents, you might find build-to-suit, you might find land, you might find centers that are already for sale. So there are a lot of many opportunities to enter the industry, but we definitely have to try to always run a business plan regardless of the size of the center. Even if it's a home daycare center, this is a very good exercise to follow or a faith-based center. Regardless of the business plan, having a business plan helps us navigate the uncertainties of what could happen and understand our market better. So once you have those three first components and you have everything you need, then you're ready to build a comparison grid. This is where you actually put properties next to one another and you see how much it costs per square footage. And if this one has how many parking lots, and you compare them side by side to try to see which one is better and to try to tailor, go back to the demo report and to see that specific site and who is around that area. So let's say you pass the first stage, the pre-stage. Okay, you found the trade area, you found site, is a good market. Well, you're not sure yet. We have to move into the second phase. The second phase is actually conduct a market research. So in order to do the market research, the first thing is a 5-step process, and it's the backbone for developing the marketing plan for the business plan. So in this section, you will actually be reading about the market, understanding the growth of the market, seeing who your competitors are. You start looking at only your consumers. Who are your consumers? And you do conduct a market survey. So let's walk one by one. So the market needs. So the first part is you need to understand if there's a market need. You might be in a great area or location, but the reality is that there might be too many competitors in that area. So there's a formula to understand if there's still room to actually understand that. So once you understand that there's a market need and you calculate that, then we go into what products am I going to compete on. So are you going to offer childcare, the infant programs? Is there a room? Is there room maybe for preschool programs? Once you narrow down and you understand what is your opportunity, then you're ready to do a competitive landscape grid. So that's where you actually go in the field and find out who are your competitors. Go to Google, and you will find very soon that you have two types of competitors in every child care center. You will find centers that are direct competitors, which offer the same services and have pretty much your same price, or you can find competitors that are indirect competitors. And let me give you an example. So one day we received an inquiry over the phone, and we invited the parents to come in to the center, and like the first thing she said over the phone was that this is what I'm paying right now. Are you willing to actually match this? So we told her, and we kindly refer her to a competitor. And why? Because she was not the type of customers we're looking for. Some ideal customers in your market might be looking for the most competitive price centers. In our case, we wanted parents to also value our services and pay fair price for our services. So when you go into this, then you go straight into creating your competitor grid. What is their location? What are their prices? What type of quality? What is their license capacity? And then same, direct or indirect competitor. For example, if you are a home daycare provider, then you will be an indirect competitor of a child care center. So those are things because you're not competing for the same target market. Or even in the child care market segment, there are competitors that are priced differently. So that's how you can find who your competitors are. So once you have that, you know how much your competitors are charging. You need that critical piece of information to determine your prices. Then you're ready to do what we call SWOT analysis. So SWOT, it means strengths. What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? And that comes back. You really need to separate your emotions from your data. So because this is critical, you really have to understand this competitor has a better curriculum offering that I do. This curriculum has a better customer service, and you will have to be able to put that on paper to really understand what your strengths are. So once you have that and you create your now, then you're ready for a market survey. And there are many ways. Like when I did my market surveys many years ago, before I opened my first center, I had to ask friends. And I asked them, do you use childcare? How many times? How often? What type of childcare centers? But the good news is that in the age of social media, you just have to go online. You can do online surveys and things like that. So when I was in my first center, I asked a lot of my friends. These are my kids. And I didn't want to drive a lot, so I really wanted to be in a specific trade area close to my home. But I also had to separate my emotions from the facts. So when I did step 1, 2, 3 and started the market research, I discovered that specific zip code was not going to work because there was not a growing population, and there were too many competitors already in that market segment. So that's how we used to do it. Now you have many new tools to conduct a market survey and actually ask end users that are parents that are living there to understand that. So there are 3 potential outcomes of a market research, and some of them you might not like it. It might be, yes, this is a great market, there's a market need for this is great. It might be, no, this is definitely not a good market, there are too many competitors, there's not a lot of growth. Or it might be maybe, like that demographic report, that maybe that area will grow someday. So once you have that and you understand that, so that's why you don't start writing a business plan until you actually do this step first. You write a business plan when you actually have the location, you've done the market research, you find a site, and now you're ready to make it formal. And now you're ready to develop your brand positioning statement. So that's like, who am I? Like, what are my strengths? And you build that based on what your customers are looking for and how you're different from everybody. You might have competitors in your market that are offering more extracurricular activities or foreign languages, but you might be great at individualized instruction. You have to really understand what is it that makes you different from everybody else. So let's say you follow all those rules, and now you're ready. How much do I need to open a childcare center? Well, again, that depends. In childcare, you actually follow tracks. So for early childhood teachers to actually go into the business side of this, the best way to do this would be to start with a home childcare center. It's a great way to actually step into the industry, and you wouldn't need a lot of money, but we do need to follow up with creating this business plan to understand and to set realistic goals for your enrollment and for your financials. So no matter the size of your business or the structure, it's a great business practice to start building your skill set as a business, because the next step for a lot of educators after you open your home daycare might be going into a bigger childcare setting, maybe with 20, 30, 40 kids. So those are skills that you build over time as you gain confidence. So once you have that, so the money that you need to start a childcare center depends on the size of your business and the type of childcare setting that you're going to offer, and all those forms and legal ways to incorporate your business, as we saw at the beginning. So now you're ready to sit down and write a business plan. But before you do that, you have to make sure this is going to work. So based on your market report, the first thing to start building actually a financial plan and the projection that also follows a step-by-step process. So the first thing we need to understand is, okay, what type of real estate am I going to get into? Is it a build-to-suit, which is something that a builder will do for you and then they will lease it to you? Would this be a lease agreement in a mall? Would I be repurposing real estate? That is when you go into an existing real estate and then you convert it into a childcare center. Is this a land or is this an existing childcare center? So you really have to understand what is it, because real estate will be one of your biggest expenses and what actually could commit most of your capital. So for sure, the least expensive way to enter the market is by leasing a space, because you will need less money as a down payment. When you buy a real estate, because that will be real estate is usually very expensive, it will require you to have a larger down payment. So usually people start with a lease agreement to get your feet wet. So you go into this first lease agreement, and usually they will ask you for a certain deposit, and you will have different things, and a lot of the details are in the book. That is your biggest cost. So once you understand that, then you can sit down and with a pen and pencil or your computer, or whatever you prefer, you can start building your startup budget. So how much do I need for furniture? How much do I need for insurance? This is when you start calling vendors and asking them for quotes. How much do I need for pre-operating expenses? How much am I going to spend before I actually open that center? How much will I earn? And in order to know all this, you need knowledge of child development too. You need to know what furniture you need to buy. And our relationship with Griffin House, they have great tools to actually navigate through all this. So that will be included in your startup budget. A word of caution. So when you start a new business, there's one thing that will happen for sure. Nothing will be what you expect. So it could be that you plan for 3 months. That's why I always suggest to put something called the contingency. So that means you have to leave a little bit of money for emergency, because that's guaranteed. You're going to have emergencies. You might not be able to collect money from many months if you're opening, or maybe who knows when you reach your break even. So you can start your budget in different ways. So that's when you have that right information, whatever it is, 10,000, 50,000, whatever. I'm going to answer Catherine's questions later about the funding. So there are many ways to actually reach funding. One, you can do for grants, but usually that's a little bit more complicated. Another way to actually do it is maybe through finding partners, right? If you are a teacher, you can put some money there, and then you can actually have an investor. So this could be something interesting. That this could be something that you can do with other people. So then you can sell parts of your company too, and you can actually also get a grant or other things around. So the other thing is, once you have that ready, then you need to get yourself an accountability tool. That means you have to sit with yourself based on the results of your market study and set up your realistic sales projection. How many kids can I get there? And hold yourself accountable for those results. So then you will go by month and you will set up your projections. But you have to be always very realistic and maybe talk to another entrepreneur and ask them, how many kids did you have at the beginning? How many kids do you have by the first year? Usually it takes a little bit. It takes months to actually build your reputation. So you have to be prepared for that as well. So let's say you build your sales projection, you have your down payment. Then there are other steps that you take in order to do that. Then you need to know your pricing to build your financial projection. So the way you do that is that you probably would go and talk to several competitors in your area and find out how much they're charging. And that's the start of creating what we call a profit and loss statement and your financial statement. So let's say you have all that, you have your projections, your self-accountability reports, then you have to work on other parts of the business, which are the operations, the management, the hiring, which are a lot where we're working right now for our second book, are all those details on how to do that. So a childcare business plan is like an overview, gives you a glimpse on what your business how your business will act in different stages until maturity. It also provides you with very valuable information because it's a document that you will go back and navigate and probably go back and revisit during different stages to remember why you started it, to remember what are your differentiators. It will remind your team sometimes when you're lost. What is it that makes a difference? It will help you navigate when competitors enter the market. Then you have a backup plan. You know what makes you different from everybody else. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle, is to really understand their identity. So a business plan is something that will help you throughout the existence of your business. And it always has to go back to the entrepreneur that started it. So I believe that childcare entrepreneurs, we all have one thing in common, and that's our passion, but also we understand that the quality of our centers is directly related to the time and effort we spend during those early stages, shaping that business and putting our thoughts and ideas into practice. So now I'm going to go back and I think we don't have a lot of time. Now it's time for the questions. So we'll start taking some questions now.
All right, time for a few questions. We've had several come in. You still have plenty of time to send in some of the questions. All right, let's go back to the beginning. The first question is, did you write your own business plan, and is there help for creating a business plan?
I did write. I've launched many different businesses in my life, and I've always written a business plan. And sometimes I get to the second step, and I realize, well, you know what? It doesn't really work. So that's where you really have to be attached to your emotions, because that it might not work. You don't want to get into a business that is not going to work. So that's why this foundational skill is really important in the early stages.
Does it require you to have knowledge and skills in healthcare when opening a child care facility?
Absolutely. I think in healthcare, right, you specifically mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to have like a very diverse knowledge when running a childcare center. You can become a childcare entrepreneur coming from any area. There's no specific requirements or education that makes you become a childcare entrepreneur. So the most important quality, I would always go back to it, is the willingness to learn and understand your inventory of skills, your strengths. So if you're a healthcare professional, that comes very handy, especially now, right, with COVID and the world post-COVID. But then you will have to add some other skill sets. So that might be child development and also a business. So you need a wide variety of skills to run. That's why we started the seminar, going back to who is really a childcare entrepreneur, how we define them, and how will they look like in the future.
And we've had several questions on education. Is there a certain degree that you need, or do you have to have a bachelor's or a master's to own and operate a center?
So actually, to become a childcare entrepreneur, that means the investor, you don't need to have a degree in education. Anybody can become a childcare entrepreneur, right? If they meet the criteria of their states. So usually for owners, background checks and things like that, right? So usually what we have in our industry is a lot of like a dual management system of a lot of entrepreneurs that like hire the education staff that have that education degree, because it takes some time to understand child development. It took me many years to actually understand like the difference of every age group and to enjoy it and to master them as well. So, but it doesn't, to answer that question, we don't need to have a degree, but what we do need to have is first the willingness to put the hard work, second, the willingness to learn and from others, and to reach out to other entrepreneurs and ask them and really understand if this is a track that we really want to pursue, because it's a big commitment, not only in the part of raising and educating the most, like the kids during the most critical years of development, but it's also a commitment. It's a lot of work, childcare entrepreneurship.
How do you go about creating a business plan?
So
is there a certain place that you start?
Yes. So that's some of the things that we went over in the presentation. So before I even sit down and write a business plan, step number one, find your trade area. And step number two, as we said, just do the demographics, run a demographic report, and then you will see if there's enough children. For example, I live in a zip code where the average age is 49, right? And there are like 1,000 kids around us. And believe me, we don't want to have any more kids. We're 49 now. We take them from 9 to 6. That's it. So that is probably not a good trade area because there are not a lot of kids. It's more like a mature neighborhood. And there are not a lot of new families coming into the area. So that's probably one of the keys to success, understanding that marketing. And then once you do that, then you have to be able to find sites. You might meet number one and number two, but then you don't find a site. So entrepreneurship, childcare entrepreneurship is like a roller coaster. That's the best way I can describe it. You can be super excited and come back home one day and say, I found the perfect site for my childcare center. And then the next day you call the landlord and say, so sorry, it's no longer available. So there are a lot of like obstacles along the way. So that's why we always reinforce that, like, you really need to know, you really need to want to do this, or you really need to set a plan to do that. Even if you're a teacher, one of our providers in the network, she's awesome. She was a teacher. She started as a teacher, and then she became a director, and she wanted to open her own childcare center. So she said, I'm going to make a plan. So for like 10 years, she did that, and she worked really hard. And then she bought an existing school and did a business plan for this existing center, and she's now very successful. But she had a plan. That's one of the things all childcare entrepreneurs that are successful have in common. They have a plan in place, and they can overcome those obstacles because they really want to do this.
We've had several different questions about funding. So if you could talk a little bit about funding, what different types of funding there are, grants, etc.
So funding, you do need you need money to start a business. That's the reality. How much you need depends on the childcare center that you want to open. Okay, so if you want to open a home childcare center, you might need $10,000. If you want to open a larger center, you might require more. So that depends on that. The fundings there are a lot of. So let's divide this in two. There's a startup fund, which is the down payment that you need, and then there's the remaining. So let's say you want to open a home daycare center, you need $10,000, but you only have $2,000. So you would have to go to the bank to ask for the remaining money. So startup funding you can actually find different sources of funding. So either you can go, entrepreneurs go to friends and families, which if that's the only route, that's one way to do it. You go and you find a partner, or there are grants to open childcare centers or things like that to get that initial startup fund. For the remaining, for the balance, so the banks, they obviously want to see the down payment in order for you to get a loan. They want to see, they will analyze your credit score, they would analyze your financials, they want to see that you are able to repay the loan. So those are questions that you will go through a due diligence process with a banker. But there are many ways that you can finance a center. So you can have an SBA loan, you can have a commercial loan, you can actually have a line of credit, that's even from your home. So there are many different ways that we discuss in detail in the book of what are the pros and cons of each one of them. But there are many ways to structure the business.
Awesome. You're just so full of such great information. How do you recommend conducting market research? And what is a good time frame to do that research? Is it 3 months, 1 year?
So the market research part is critical because this will be the foundation of your entire business. So this could take months. So you could be studying a market for months, and then you don't find a site in that place, in that trade area, so you have to start all over again, right? So in order to actually, so this is a very tricky question to answer because it depends. So that's why, like when I started my career, it was taking me so long to find new trade areas, right? It was very hard because I didn't have the real estate knowledge that I have now. So it would take it would take me a long time. I was not doing any process. That's why in the book, I actually follow my own patterns of thought how I used to do it before, and I changed it to the way it's supposed to be. So the beautiful thing about this is that you have to be willing to let go. So if you start researching and doing your market research for an area, but you see that real estate is really expensive in that area, that there's no way that you can afford, well, it might be a good idea just, find another one. It's okay. This process of opening a childcare center will challenge you to your core because it will require you doing different stages of the process to start over again. So that's why it's hard to answer how long is the market research. But let's say that you already have a great real estate. So you can do that really quickly. Like you can do that in a matter of a week, 2 weeks, if you understand what you're looking for. So if you have the site, then you have to understand the other things that we discussed in the presentation. You have to understand, you have to do a market survey. You have to go to online communities. You have to understand what are people looking for. Are there too many competitors in this market? Because that's another thing. Like when you enter a market that is saturated, that means that you have a competitor in every corner. You really, especially in that situation that's called market saturation, you really need to bring something different to the table, because the reality is that you'll be fighting with everybody else. If there are only 1,000 kids that are going to childcare and there are 10 childcare centers that with a license capacity of 10, the pie, you have to split the pie. And in some instances, there are big centers competing. So it's hard. You really need to understand what are your differentiators and what makes you stand out from your competitors.
Then we have 2 more questions. So whenever you start a business, your clients do not honor their obligations, how do you continue to maintain your business?
So that's why you have to have a very operating procedures in place and be very consistent with your policies and procedures. So I guess this question goes back to if a parent doesn't pay or something, or that's a common situation. So you have to have very consistent rules in place and policies in handbooks. And for example, in our case, or the most common practice is if you're 2 weeks late, we're sorry, but you cannot be enrolled in our program. And you have to be strict. And that's another way you have to separate your emotions from business, because you have to be able to make other people accountable. Because when you become a childcare entrepreneur, you're also responsible for bills, and you have a big responsibility too. So you have to make sure that everyone is accountable, including your partners, your customers, and everybody else.
So we have time for one more question. We will answer all of the user questions on the EdWeb blog. And if you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and comment and send in the questions. And they will also be on the show page on the EdWeb community at edweb.net/bookchat. So the last question we have is, what is your best advice when working with employees?
Well, so you have to become a leader. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And it all starts by understanding who you are. So dealing with employees involves, so that's part of our second book that's coming in the series. This book is more for when you are about to open your center. So, but this is a great question to jump into operations, right? So when you select employees, you really have to have an onboarding process. You have to see if there's their common values, and you have to become a leader and really understand that. So that's like a whole different chapter. There are many techniques on how to do that. But I think this is the beginning is having a good recruiting process and understanding your skill set. Like if you know, for example, that you cannot handle a lot of drama, that probably will be a good idea to get like a director that can put a stop on that. Because usually our setting, that's one of the most common things, or that will come in the second book.
Awesome. This is such great information. Thank you so much again, Marnie. And then again, we will post all the questions onto the show page, and you'll be able to see that by joining the community. And we want to remind you guys that we are so excited to offer a gift for attending today's webinar. Be sure to go to griffinhouse.com where you can find Marnie's book, The Basics of Childcare, and you can use the code BOOKCHAT to get 20% off your entire order whenever you check out. And thanks again. It was such a joy to talk with Marnie today. And then one more reminder to be sure to join the free online community for this webinar. As a member, you get all sorts of great resources to view and share this recording, to take the CE quiz, to download these slides and the chat log, to join in discussions, and then also get invitations to upcoming webinars. Then be sure to register for our next webinar, Provoking Curiosity, which will be on Wednesday, May 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And thanks again. Thank you all for joining us today.